Hi, welcome to my next video. My name's Jeff Rhodes, and I'm the author of this new book on Office 365, creating business applications with Office 365, techniques in SharePoint, Power Apps, Power BI, and more. And it's available for pre-order on Amazon, and it'll be showing up on in bookstores and so forth the next few months. So what we're doing in these videos is talking about Office 365 and SharePoint and Power BI and so forth. So in this video, we're going to follow up on our earlier one. We had two videos, one with InfoPath and one in Power Apps, where we could restrict the access to a particular control, to an approval control, and we hard-coded in a particular user. And what we want to do here is build a list of users and then use that list. So that's much easier for the end user to be able to maintain, because we don't want them going into either InfoPath or into Power Apps and start having to change the programming themselves. So let's get started. I'm in Office 365. I'm going to go to SharePoint, and the site we've been using is this collaboration site. So I'm going to do InfoPath in this one, and then we'll do Power Apps in the next one. So let's go in and we'll go ahead and add an app. So I already have our list, and we'll cover that in a minute, but we're going to make a list of our purchases, but this is going to be a list of users. Okay, so we'll just say accounting users, like that. And we'll go ahead and create it. And then what we have there, so let's go into our settings. This comes up a lot. If you look down, we have a title column that's required, and we can't, all we really want is a user. And so we can go in and change the content type and get rid of the title, but also this title has the little 3 dots next to it, which makes it easier to edit. So what I usually do is I'll usually come in here and I'll rename this, and I'll call it phone, because at least in our environment at the Air Force Academy, usually the phone's not right. In Active Directory, you can't rely on it, so you've got to come in and change it. But I won't require that it has data. Now the other thing that will happen here is if you don't put anything in, it'll say something like no title available or something. So I like to go ahead and put a default, like our numbers start with 333, so I'll just put it like that, and that'll remind them to put something in there. And I'll hit OK. And we'll change both the content type and the view, just so that it looks right in a minute. But let's go ahead and get to the big thing. I'm going to add 2 columns. One, we're only going to use one of them here, but we'll just call it user, and we'll make it of type person, and we are going to require that one be there, but not unique values, even though we could, and we'll allow it from all users. Now this is very important. Let me zoom in a little bit on this box here, get my zoom going. Okay, and what it says is the name with presence. That's normally what you want, but since for InfoPath, that's not going to be what we want. So let's zoom it out, and we're going to want to change this to scroll down, and it's going to be, where is the one I want? I think it's username. It's a little bit different. I haven't done this in Office 365 that much, because our environment's 2013. They're at one of the ones where I use this at the Academy. But let's give it a shot. We'll see if that's the one we want or not. But what we're looking for is the username that matches up what we'll see in InfoPath. And let's add our other column, and then we'll test it. So later on, we'll be doing using this to send email. So we'll say send email notification. There we go. Yes, no. And that way what we can do, and I'll leave it yes as the default, and that allows us to choose, and the user can decide if this person wants to get emails or not. For example, maybe you have somebody who's allowed, but you don't want them to get the email when it's their turn to be approval. But then somebody goes on vacation, they can go in and change who gets the email. So this is a nice functionality. So we'll explain how to use that later. So while we're here, let's go ahead and get everything in the right order, because we want the name to come before the phone number. So we come into advanced settings and we allow management of content types. So we'll say OK here. And what that allows us to do is we can now click on the content type. And all we really want to do is change the column order here. There we can put the user as number 1 like that. And that will make our form look good. And even though we already have it in InfoPath, if we want to edit them here, that'll be the other list. It's in InfoPath. So just look how we expect. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and just change the view that comes in. So notice that the phone came first, but we'll put that second. And while we're at it, I don't want to sort this by ID, so let's sort that by user, like that. And we don't need any more of the rest of these. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and let's add a new one. Oh, and I need to turn that off. I don't really like this. This is Office 365 where it allows us to pick the content type when we turn that on. So let's put myself in there. Got a couple of my family in here, so let's just put myself in, and I'll just say 1111 like that and hit save. Yeah, so this is basically what I want. Well, it's not exactly, so I'm gonna pause that for a minute and look at the right setting, because what I want that is a more elaborate one that looks like InfoPath. That's basically the email there. So I'll pause for a second. Let me find our recording and back in a minute. All right, well, we figured it out. So you can see we left it, and this wasn't exactly what we want, even though we'll probably use this when we get to Power Apps. But for InfoPath, it has a username function that we want this to match up to. So let's go fix that. So we'll go back to list settings and go to that column. And the one I actually want for the display is account. I didn't notice that the first time. So I'll hit OK. And while we're here, let's go ahead and turn off the content type again so that we don't have that in our form. So we'll hit OK there. All right, that's what we want. So if you saw my earlier video on InfoPath, you'll see that it has a username function, and that username looks just like that. So when we display it this way, then these match up together. All right, so let's continue on, and we're going to go to Site Contents, and let's go to our Purchases InfoPath. And so we created this in our earlier one, and we actually, if you might remember on that, we need to use Edge to launch this, which I'm not using at the moment. So let's paste into there to Edge or to Internet Explorer. We'll come in there and we'll customize an InfoPath. And just in case you didn't see it or you wanted a little review, what we did is we had a field here, is accounting user, that we set up on a rule on the way in. So let's go look at that. What's on data? On form load, and we said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to set that value, and then we're going to do this, contains username. Let me zoom in a little bit. So if the username contains that my email address, a section of it, then we're going to set that to true. Another, if it doesn't contain it, it's going to be false. But that's, again, hard-coded so that if somebody goes on vacation or somebody moves, change job, we got to go in and change this form. Plus, it only allows if one of them's in there, so if there could be 3 people who are allowed, and now we got to start doing a bunch of or statements, and it gets a little complicated. So what we want to do is we want to do a data connection instead. Okay, so we'll come up to data connection, and we're going to add one. We're going to receive data from a SharePoint library or list, and it knows where we are for collaboration, so that's good. And notice we can pick that accounting user. And what we want to do here is we're not really looking anybody up here. We're just going to do a query to see if they're there or not. But it's very important that we got to grab that user column. Okay, we don't really need the phone. We don't need the send email notification. We don't need to sort by anything, because we're just going to get 1 record back if they're there and 0 records if they're not. So we hit next, and I like to call this query so that we know it. I don't need to run this when the form is open, because we're going to run it once. We actually have to set some. We're not going to run it automatically. We're going to run it when the form's open, but we've got to set up the query first. All right, so we're ready there. And so now we're going to do in the form load is we're going to leave the set accounting user, but we need some more things first. So basically what happens is we need these in sets of 3. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do action, and we're going to set, say, accounting user value. And we're going to set a field's value. But the field, what we're going to do is we show advanced view, and then we select our data connection. And I cover this quite a bit in the book, but basically the way in InfoPath that you do a query is you set the query first, the query field, and then you run the query, and then you read it out of the data fields. So if you think of SQL, standard query language, you say select something where ID equals XYZ or whatever. The where clause is the equivalent to the query field. So we're going to set the query field, and that's why I needed the user. We're going to set the user to be that, and then our value is going to be the username function, like that. All right, and then we're going to need to move this up. Scroll over a little bit, see if I can give myself a little bit more room here. There we go. We can move up like that. Then we're going to do another one. We're going to query accounting user, and all we're going to do is run the query, and we just pick it. And then our third one is going to actually be set is accounting user. So we're going to run it, but it's going to be a little different. We're still going to set our field of is accounting user, but we're going to replace this one as well. And this one gets a little bit complicated, but what we kind of need to realize is that we're going to read the query and count it. So if I'm in there, if the current user's in there, then it's going to be, the count's going to be 1. If the current user's not in there, then the count's going to be 0. So we're going to insert the function, and we're going to do math, and we'll do, let's see, count. Let's do all of them and look for count. There we go. Would have thought that was a math one, but that's all right. And then we do here, again, show advanced user. We go to the query accounting user, if I can select that. And now we're going to read the ID. Okay, and we just say that the count of that is greater than 0. Put a space in there. And what I'll do just for us to test for right now is, well, I was going to say we could put that on there, but since we already, let's go look at the field, we already say that if that accounting user is false, then we disable the control. So right now I'm in there, so it should come back as enabled when I run as myself. And we'll go and then delete me out of the list, put somebody else in, and we'll see that it's should be disabled then. So let's try that. So let's go ahead and quick publish. All right, we'll go back to Chrome now, refresh. So we can just edit this old one. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Edit item. Just thinking about it. So it's enabled, so that's good. We can go ahead and edit any parts of the form. Let's just say that we found out now it's 2000, just so we can see how it works. And I'll go ahead and approve it. An accounting user. Now let's go back to this accounting user and let's edit that. Well, actually, let's first do this. Let's see if we really need it to be this format. So I'll go ahead and let's just change the display. So that'll be a good test. So we'll go back to user and just go back to the default, which is name with presence, like that. That's normally how you go to look. What's nice is when we get in, even leaving it this way, when we go into SharePoint Designer and so forth to send emails, the display name still works. But let's go and try it again. I never added these to the left bar, so I'll have to go back to site contents to get them. And we'll just do, I'll do new item. Won't make any difference. Yeah, see, notice I can't click it anymore. So that's why that name with presence is not right, and we need it to be account. But that's also if I hadn't have been in the list. And so we've got what we want, is we want it to anybody in that list be able to get to the form. Anybody who's not will be there. So let's do one more kind of cleanup thing. Actually, let's go back and I'll fix this just so that it's the way it should be. So in case you're coming in at the end, to make that really work, we go back and change that to account. And then the other thing we should do is go permissions for this list. What you would normally do is stop inheriting permissions and then just limit it right to, say, the people who are in the accounting section, and only they can add people to the list, so that people can't add themselves, approve it, and then turn it off again. The other thing I do, actually, let's add one more thing, is what I'll typically do is pick, say, you can say who it was in that list that did it. So let's go ahead and do that while we're there. So let's go to purchases, InfoPath, and that'll be kind of fun. So let's go in there. Oh, and actually we can do it right in InfoPath because I still have it open. So let's go ahead and add a field, and we'll just say accounting approved by, like that. And we'll come and we'll just add another insert row below, kind of like that. And we'll do that. We can a little space there. We'll change this to a drop-down box. And then we need one more data connection, because we don't want to use our query one, because that was for specific purposes, but we'll do another one just like it. We'll do it as a SharePoint. That's another reason why I use query for the first part. So we'll can go to accounting users. Now here is I want the user, but I want that to be sorted by the user too. There it is. And we can leave it accounting users. And note I do want it to do automatically, so that that drop down is ready to go right when we open the form. So we do that, and then we come in here on the properties, and we get it from an external data source, and we get it from accounting users. Now, depending on what we're going to want to do here, we can sometimes change that to account ID or something else. Like if we were going to start working with that username, that would be equivalent of account ID. But here we want it, whatever we put in value is going to get actually sent back to SharePoint in the list. So we want both of these to be display name in our PERS thing. And then the last thing is we obviously don't want to be able to change that. So we'll copy this rule and we'll paste it in and use it here. So again, if they're not in the accounting list, they can't choose anybody either, which would make sense. So we'll go ahead and publish that. And then we'll add somebody else in that list just so that we can test it. So I'll put my wife Sue in there. Here we go. We'll just put her as 8888. Later on we won't send her an email and do it like that. So if it's working right, we'd expect for both of us to be in that list. So let's try that. Come back here. And we'll say new item. There we go, that's enabled. And notice even though that we displayed the list with that kind of that long account format, it was smart enough to give us the real names when we come in there. So that's a little cleaner. If we, let's just put one in there so we see how it works, and we'll say $50, and we'll say I approved it, like that. All right, and you see it, put that in there. And that should do it for this time. So come back for the next video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I look forward to going along the journey with Office 365 with you. Thanks. Have a great day.